Welcome to our channel.
For today's video, we will discuss the Renaissance and Reformation.
But before that, here are the subtopics. First, the Renaissance brings change.
Second, the Renaissance spirit is reflected in literature and art.
Third, the Reformation ends religious unity in Western and Central Europe. Here are some questions that we will answer at the end of our discussion.
In what ways was the Renaissance period different from the Middle Ages?
For what sort of works is each of these artists famous? Raphael, Michelangelo, and Leonardo da Vinci.
What teachings and practices of the Church did Luther challenge? Why did people support Luther? The Renaissance brings change. Interest in classical learning inspires the Renaissance. The word Renaissance is French for revert. However, the term came to be applied to the period in which far-reaching changes occurred in the arts, intellectual life, and ways of viewing the world. The Renaissance lasted from the 14th century through the 16th century, and its influence continued even longer.
Scholars studied the humanities. Renaissance scholars' interest in Greek and Roman learning developed into the study of the humanities, Latin and Greek language and literature, composition, rhetoric, history, and philosophy. Music and mathematics were sometimes studied also. Scholars believed that ancient Greeks and Romans had excelled in these subjects. Scholars who took part in the intellectual movements that grew out of the study of humanities called humanists.
The Renaissance begins in Italy. Began about 1350 in the northern Italian city-state. Petrarch leads the rediscovery of classical literature. He studied Roman literature and philosophy. He rediscovered a number of Roman authors whose work had been forgotten during the Middle Ages.
The Renaissance emphasizes life on earth. In his studies of Latin language and literature, Petrarch sought to understand the thoughts and feelings of the ancient Romans. Renaissance humanists tried to understand the entire civilization of the ancient world, not just selected ideas. Renaissance thinkers study history critically. History, like classical literature and philosophy, would help them understand their own times. They discovered mistakes that medieval scribes had made in copying the text. They found that certain documents were forgeries. Politics are important in the Renaissance. Renaissance humanists valued public service and praised those who were useful to society. For them, education was a sound preparation for a rewarding life. Also, humanists sought to cultivate eloquence in communicating ideas, effective public speaking, polished manners, and elegant writing style.
Machiavelli takes a practical view of politics. Niccolò Machiavelli of Florence, a diplomat student of politics, drew on Roman history to set up guidelines for rulers. Believed that a ruler should do whatever was necessary to gain and keep power. Wealthy patrons support the Renaissance, Florence, the cultural center of Renaissance Italy. Medici family. Bankers who had branch offices and cities throughout Western Europe. Cosimo de' Medici founded the Platonic Academy in Florence.
Wealthy patrons support the Renaissance. The best-known member of the Medici family was Cosimo's grandson, Lorenzo. He is known as the Magnificent. He is a classical scholar, skilled architect, and talented poet who wrote in the style of Petrarch. Women of the wealthy and noble Italian families also played important roles as patrons of the arts. One of the most remarkable women in the Renaissance was Isabella d'Este. Her own learning and encouragement of the arts made Isabella known in her time as the first woman of the world.
The Renaissance encourages the development of talents. Romans were ambitious for fame and worldly success. Ideal person was located in the humanities and could talk with wit and charm. Men expected to be good swordsmen. Men and women took part in sports, including an early form of tennis. Printing spreads Renaissance ideas. Printing press, one of the new developments in technology. European first used movable metal type to print a book. A German, Johann Gutenberg, is usually credited with printing the first book, a copy of the Bible. Most of the early printed books were religious works. The invention of printing made books and new ideas available to a much larger audience.
Renaissance ideas spread to Northern Europe. Erasmus, the most respected and influential humanist of the Northern Renaissance, he carefully studied both the humanities and Christian doctrines. He felt that the study of humanities was more than the study of science. In the Praise of Folly, Erasmus criticized scholars, scientists, philosophers, and clergy of his own time for being narrow-minded.
Renaissance ideas spread to Northern Europe. Sir Thomas More, an English statesman, a devout Catholic, and a student of both church doctrine and the humanities, his book Utopia described an ideal, peaceful society.
The Renaissance spirit is reflected in literature. Renaissance spirit and the renewed interest in ancient Greece and Rome were the inspiration for a brilliant creative period in literature. Human beings were the focus of the arts of the Renaissance. Renaissance literature. Rabelais and Montaigne expressed the Renaissance spirit in France. The emphasis on individuality was reflected in very different ways in the works of two great French Renaissance writers, known as François Rabelais and Michel de Montaigne. Franco Rabelais. He encouraged the Renaissance ideal of living a full busy life. He himself was a monk, scholar, and physician who also studied plants and Roman archaeological sites. He wrote, "Let nothing in the world be unknown to you." Rabelais wrote a 5-volume work known as Gargantua and Pantagruel. In contrast to Rabelais, there is other great French Renaissance writer who lived quietly and wrote short, thoughtful essays that reflected his personal thoughts and interests. He is known as Michel de Montaigne. He drew on his own observations, experience, and travels. He wrote in conversational style, exploring ideas about friendship, education, and many other subjects that interested him. His essays influenced European literature into modern times. Cervantes Mac's medieval ideals. Miguel de Cervantes Saavedra. He served as a soldier against the Turks and was imprisoned for 5 years by pirates in North Africa. He later became a Spanish tax collector. His masterpiece, Don Quixote, mapped the way medieval codes of chivalry distorted reality.
Shakespeare provides insight into human behavior. William Shakespeare, a poet and a playwright, the world's finest dramatist and the greatest writer in the English language, an actor and playwright, not a classical scholar.
Renaissance art and architecture. Renaissance and individual artists portray individuals. They use ancient works of art as their models in depicting a variety of subjects. They portrayed Renaissance politicians and patrons of art and ordinary people. Medieval artists had used their creativity mainly to serve the church and express their religious feelings.
Artists strive for balance and proportion. Renaissance artists and architects saw nature as beautiful because it was balanced and well-proportioned. Renaissance architects admired Greek and Roman buildings and served for the same kind of balance and proportion in the buildings they designed. Gothic Cathedral, the symbol of the Middle Ages, which soared upward toward heaven and seemed to defy laws of balance.
The use of perspective adds realism to painting. Another step toward realism was the discovery of how to achieve perspective, the impression of depth and distance in the flat surface of a painting. The Florentine painter, Giotto, first used this technique in about 1300. Giotto's realistic style seemed odd to medieval eyes. However, in his advances were ignored until the Renaissance. In the 15th century, the Florentine architect Filippo Brunelleschi discovered that painters could use mathematical laws in planning their pictures, and thus show perspective accurately. His friend Masaccio applied these laws in paintings by making it seem that a system of lines met at a certain focal point and the painting must have created an illusion of space and distance.
Jan van Eyck. Medieval painters commonly used a kind of paint called tempera. Oil painting was developed by the Flemish painter Jan van Eyck. Oil painting let artists work more slowly and allowed them to obtain more lifelike effects.
Raphael is a master of design. Raphael Santi. He combined religious art with the Renaissance spirit. He became famous for his paintings of Madonnas, pictures of Mary, the mother of Jesus. He is also a master of design and is called architect.
Michelangelo creates lasting masterpieces. Most Renaissance artists possess several talents: painting, sculpture, and architecture. Many were poets, as were Michelangelo. He was the greatest sculptor of the Renaissance. He is skilled as a painter, poet, and architect. He called sculpture the first of arts. When he was 23, he made a statue called Pieta, which shows Mary holding the body of Jesus after the crucifixion. He created the masterpiece, the Sistine Chapel. Paintings made his reputation as the greatest artist.
Leonardo fulfills the Renaissance ideal. Leonardo da Vinci, an engineer, scientist, and inventor who was far ahead of his time, now regarded as universal genius. He left few completed paintings, but they include such famous works as The Last Supper and the Mona Lisa. He drew objects and people as he saw them with his own eyes. He dissected corpses and made careful drawings of the structure or muscles and bones. He examined natural objects, a bird's wing, the vein of a leaf, the leg of a horse, with close attention to details.
Northern Renaissance artists emphasized realistic details. Peter Bruegel the Elder, greatest painter of realistic contemporary scenes, he created large dramatic paintings of farm workers in crowds to towns, people at work and play. Albrecht Dürer, who was equally skilled in creating paintings, woodcuts, and engravings. Hans Holbein the Younger, he created portraits that vividly show his subjects' personalities as well as the realistic details of their clothing and the objects around them.
Reformation ends religious unity in Western and Central Europe.
Wycliffe calls for changes in church doctrine. He questioned the teaching that a person could gain salvation only through the church. He said that the Bible, not the church, should be regarded as the supreme source of authority. Wycliffe and his followers made the first Bible in English. Huss criticizes the church. He criticized the church walk. In 1410, he was excommunicated. In 1415, he was arrested, found guilty of heresy, and burned at the stake. In 1420, Hussites began a rebellion against the church and the emperor. In 1434, peace was finally made. Martin Luther adopts new beliefs. Many Germans resented the worldliness, lack of the piety, and greed of some members of the clergy. Luther came to believe that men and women could be saved only by the grace of God, which would grant them faith in Christ.
Luther challenges the church. On indulgences, it was believed reduced the time that one soul would have to spend in suffering or punishment before the soul reached heaven. On October 31, 1517, the sale of indulgences was widely criticized. Luther challenges this practice publicly. Like earlier reformers, he said that the Bible provided all the guidance a person needed to live a Christian life.
Luther defies the Pope and the Emperor. In early 1521, the Pope excommunicated him. In May 1521, Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, summoned Luther to appear before the Imperial Assembly. Luther refused to go against his own conscience and changed his views, reportedly saying, "Dear stand, I cannot do otherwise." Luther translated the New Testament into German, making it possible for more people to read the Bible.
The Protestant movement spreads. Many Germans agreed with those reformers who called for a return to the piety of the early Christians. Many also were attracted by Luther's belief that each person could communicate directly with God. In 1529, several Lutheran princes met and issued a formal protest against these efforts. Because of this effort, they became known as Protestants.
The Protestant movement spread. The support of the German princes made possible the survival of the Reform movement, which split the Western Church into Roman Catholics who accepted the Pope's authority and the Protestants who did not. The movement itself came to be called the Reformation.
Religious wars break out. In 1530, many princes signed the Augsburg Confession. Augsburg Confession are written statement of their beliefs. In 1555, the Peace of Augsburg ended the religious wars in Germany. Most of the southern German rulers remained Catholic. Most of those in the north chose to become Lutheran. The division in the Protestant and Catholic states became a barrier to German unity.
Calvinism develops in Geneva. Ulrich Zwingli, the early Swiss reformer, had taught at the same as Luther. 1536, John Calvin, a French scholar and theologian, joined the reformers in Geneva and developed the form of Protestant belief called Calvinism. Calvin believed that certain people were chosen by God. Institute of the Christian's religion, where he explained his teachings.
Calvinism spreads in Europe. Calvinism appealed to many French people, some of whom were already Protestants. John Knox, Scottish Protestant, carried many Calvinist ideas to Scotland in 1550. Calvinism also influenced Reformed churches in other parts of Europe.
The English king breaks with the Pope. The Reformation in England became closely connected with the struggle for political power. Tudor King Henry VIII, who ruled England from 1509 to 1547, sought to divorce his wife. Catherine of Aragon, a Spanish princess and wife of the king. Henry wanted to marry Anne Boleyn.
Henry asked the Pope to annul his marriage. Catherine bitterly objected and called for aid from her nephew Charles V. A decision on the annulment was delayed as the emperor tried to use his influence on the Pope. Henry and his advisors began to take steps to remove England from the authority of the Pope.
Henry named Thomas Cranmer to be Archbishop of Canterbury. 1533, Cranmer approved the annulment of the marriage with Catherine and married Anne Boleyn. 1534, Parliament passed the Act of Supremacy, making it the monarch head of what was now called the Church of England. Henry had more executed for not accepting the Act of Supremacy.
England becomes a Protestant nation. Edward VI, who was 9 years old when Henry died in 1547, had been taught by Protestant tutors. In 1533, Edward died. The crown went to his half-sister, Mary I, the daughter of Catherine of Aragon. Mary ordered the persecution of English Protestants who refused to become Catholic again. She married Philip II, the Catholic King of Spain.
England becomes a Protestant nation. 1558, Mary died. She was succeeded by her half-sister Elizabeth I, the daughter of Anne Boleyn. With understanding the English people's attitude, Elizabeth turned England back to Protestantism. 1571, Parliament gave official approval to the 39 Articles, a statement setting forth the doctrines of the Church of England.
The Counter-Reformation makes changes within the Church. Counter-Reformation or Catholic Reformation were intended to strengthen and spread Catholicism. In 1545, Pope Paul III called leading churchmen to gather at Trent in northern Italy. In 1545 to 1563, the Council of Trent did not change basic teachings. Catholics were to continue to accept the principles. Only the Church could explain the Bible. Both faith and good works were necessary for salvation. The Pope was the highest and final authority in the Church. Church rituals was remain an essential part of Catholic faith, and clergy were not allowed to marry.
The Catholic Church takes action against Protestantism. The Church also drew up a list of books called the Index. New religious orders were set up to serve the Church and spread Catholic teachings. Jesuits, the Society of Jesus, founded by the Spanish nobleman named Ignatius Loyola. The order sought to keep Catholics from leaving the Church, to persuade Protestants to return to the Church, and to win converts to Catholicism.
The Reformation has lasting effect. In both Catholic and Protestant countries, the Reformation strengthened the state at the expense of the churches. Protestant rulers rejected the authority of the Pope because the Protestant reformers insisted that individuals should read the Bible themselves.
Check up questions for the first subtopic, the Renaissance brain change. The first question, in what way was the Renaissance period different from the Middle Ages?
The Renaissance differed from the Middle Ages in several ways. One was a renewed appreciation for the arts and learning of ancient Greece and Rome. Another was a new interest in worldly matters, accompanied by a growing emphasis on human life and accomplishments. Second question, how did the invention of printing help to spread Renaissance ideals throughout Europe?
The invention of printing made books and new ideas available to a much larger audience. It was many times faster to print a book than to make a copy by hand.
Third question, who were the two important Northern Renaissance scholars and what books did they write?
The most respected and influential humanist of the Northern Renaissance was Erasmus. In his book entitled The Praise of Folly, Erasmus criticized scholars, scientists, philosophers, and clergy of his own time for being narrow-minded.
Another important scholar of the Northern Renaissance was Sir Thomas More, an English statesman. His book Utopia, published in Latin in 1516, described an ideal, peaceful society and so conveyed More's criticism of the politics, society, and religion of his time. Check-up questions for the second subtopic, the Renaissance spirit is reflected in literature and art. First question, for what sort of works is each of these artists famous? Raphael, Michelangelo, and Leonardo da Vinci.
Raphael Santi combined religious art with the Renaissance spirit. He became famous for his paintings of Madonnas, pictures of Mary, the mother of Jesus.
Michelangelo was the greatest sculptor of Renaissance. He made a statue called the Pieta, which shows Mary holding the body of Jesus after the crucifixion. This work won the artist instant fame. He also created a masterpiece, the Sistine Chapel paintings, made his reputation as Rome's greatest artist.
Leonardo da Vinci. He was regarded as a universal genius who left few completed paintings, but they include such famous works, The Last Supper and Mona Lisa.
Second question, where was the center of Northern Renaissance?
Antwerp, a center of the Northern Renaissance, located in Belgium, was the center for art in the northern lands in Northern Europe for much of the 16th and 17th century.
Third question, what techniques and subjects did Northern painters emphasize?
The Northern Renaissance was famous for its advanced oil painting techniques, realistic, impressive altarpiece art, portraiture on wooden panel, paintings, as well as woodcuts and other forms of printmaking.
In their landscapes, portraits, and other works, the Northern painters emphasized precise, realistic detail and the use of light and shadow. Many artists used religious themes and symbols. Many also vividly showed contemporary life in the Dutch towns and countryside.
Check-up questions for the third subtopic. The Reformation ends religious unity in Western and Central Europe. The first question, what teachings and practices of the Church did Luther challenge?
The sale of indulgences was widely criticized, and Luther challenged this practice publicly. He did not think they had to rely on the interpretations given by the Pope or the clergy. He urged changes in church services and said that members of the clergy should be allowed to marry. Why did people support Luther?
Many Germans agreed with those reformers who called for a return to the piety of the early Christians. Many also were attracted by Luther's belief that each person could communicate directly with God. Some German princes support Luther because they saw a chance to acquire property owned by the church. Second question. What steps did the Roman Catholic Church take to try to stop the spread of Protestantism?
The Church undertook a number of reforms and other actions that were intended to strengthen and spread Catholicism. In 1545, Pope Paul III called leading churchmen to gather at Trent in northern Italy to deal with problems facing the Church. The Council of Trent did not change basic teachings. Catholics were to continue to accept the principles that only the Church could explain the Bible. Both faith and good works were necessary for salvation, and the Pope was the highest and final authority in the Church. Church ritual was to remain an essential part of the Catholic faith, and the clergy were not allowed to marry. What are these efforts called?
These efforts were called Counter-Reformation or Catholic Reformation. Here are the references. This is your presenters, Pater Gail Biga Buko
And Mariel B. Tidoko,
from BSed second year student, major in social studies, saying, "We can do this para sa bayan at sa kinabukasan." Thank you for watching.
please like, share, and subscribe!